I've spent hours and hours researching Sonic the Hedgehog, and I have discovered that Sonic loves three things. Number 1, chili dogs. Number 2, being pregnant. And number 3, leading your commander deck. Sonic the Hedgehog is a 4-mana value Jeskai Hedgehog warrior. It's a 2/4 with haste, and whenever it attacks, put a +1/+1 counter on each creature you control with flash or haste. Additionally, whenever a creature you control with flash or haste is dealt damage, create a tapped treasure token. Sonic wants to have as many other flashy and or hasty creatures as possible, that part's obvious. Since Sonic himself has haste, you can cast him when you have some hasty or flashy dudes already on the battlefield and immediately get them bigger. But the interesting part, to me anyways, is the second ability, where your creatures drop treasures when damaged, much like Sonic drops rings when he takes damage. And you could just use those treasures to slowly accelerate more hasty and flashy dudes, or you could do something a bit more interesting. You can directly support the channel via the Patreon link in the description below. There will also be affiliate links if you'd like to support the channel just by buying stuff you are going to buy anyways, or you can send a one-time tip via YouTube or via the Ko-Fi link also in the description below. Also keep an eye out for this symbol, which means that the card that's showing there with the symbol can be swapped into that section as either a budget alternative or for gameplay consideration. So without further ado, this is my take on a Sonic the Hedgehog commander deck called Blow Up the Outside World. Oh, and in case you are Sonic the Hedgehog or any other kind of supersonic creature, here's the rest of the entire video sped up for you to enjoy. Okay, now back to the video for normies. Ka-chow. This deck doesn't require any special mana base outside the requirements of a normal 3-color mana base in EDH. So run the best tri-lands and bi-lands that you got. A few single color producers and some basic lands and you'll mostly be fine. Ka-chow. As with most 3-color decks, I generally shy from a lot of utility lands. In this case I only run 3, and the first is Ancient Tome. The problem with having haste and flash creatures is that they usually have a bit higher cost than their stats and abilities would merit, since the haste or flash needs to cost something. Ancient Tomb just helps take some of the edge off that flash tax. Quarry Mountain Monastery seems like a fine sculpting tool without much downside. It does cost a lot to activate, but this is mostly there for the times when you have extra Sonic treasures or have to rebuild after a wipe. The last utility land isn't really a utility land, but it is, well, it's Hydroelectric Specimen, which has a land on its butt. This will work for some interaction, some spell misdirection more specifically, but it's also just a flash dude, which can come in handy in a pinch. Ka-chow. Our ramp is a little funky, but we do have a lot of normal cards here. All 3 of the Jeskai Signets and Talisman, as well as the traditional staples, Soul Ring and Arcane Signet. I also run Lavinia Foil to Conspiracy. This is a card I've been wanting to use like forever, ever since that weird Clue mini set thing came out. I love the idea of having a Soul Ring in the command zone and what that can allow you to do. Maybe one day I'll get to a full Lavinia Foil to Conspiracy deck, but for now she's Sonic's lackey, powering out flashy creatures. Normally I'm not super high on medallions. I prefer my ramp to actually produce mana as opposed to reduce costs. However, since a good chunk of this deck will be flash, cost reduction can provide exponential mana gains. Ka-chow. The interaction section is a bit light since most of our interaction will be done on flash creatures, which we'll get to later. However, there are 2 key pieces that we need for our game plan. That's Stifle and Tail's End. We'll get more on why these 2 specifically later on in the video. Ka-chow. We aren't a treasure-focused deck, but there are a few treasure synergies that are just too good to pass up. Specifically, Academy Manufacturer and Zorn. These are fairly simple, they just double up your treasure. Now importantly, they make untapped treasures, with Zorn making the original tapped treasure from Sonic, then making an entirely different treasure token. Academy Manufacturer replaces the treasure from Sonic, and instead creates a treasure, food, and clue, none of which have the Sonic limit of making treasures that come into play tapped. Ka-chow. We'll start the fasties with Charming Scoundrel, which is just a low mana value haster that can provide some versatility, some rummaging, or another treasure. Next, let's talk about a couple of my personal choices. First is Lightning Angel, and I love Lightning Angel. I recall playing a standard deck with Lightning Angels and Avalanche Riders and I think like Riftwing Cloud Skates. It was a crazy tempo deck, and it did very well for me. And to this day, that's kind of the feel I always want when I'm playing a Jeskai deck. I'm sure Lightning Angel has been power crept by now, but for me, I still love it. My other personal choice is Barbed Shocker, which is more on the jerk end of a personal choice as opposed to Lightning Angel, which is kind of a nostalgic choice. It's ultra disruptive, yes, and you can generally get a hit in with it since you've got 3 potential opponents to attack. And this isn't a wheel deck, so they aren't necessarily being punished by having to do that, but it is potentially very salty card, so user beware. Okay, I know I said this really wasn't a treasure deck, but come on, Sonic vomits out treasure tokens, so we might as well leverage that a bit right. Goldspan Dragon will buff those treasure tokens, and Captain Lannery Storm will get vinegar when you use those treasure tokens. And Broadside Bombardiers can get you a free ping by sacrificing those creatures when you attack. Arthur Marigold Knight and Satya Aetherflux Genius gives you some combat zone explosivity, either by putting a creature temporarily into play and attacking, or by making a usually temporary clone of another attacking creature. Ka-chow. It's time to flash some people. And what better way to flash them than by showing them your mysterious stranger? We run a few flashers that mess up people's combat, which is like my favorite thing to do. Portal Mage and Portal Manipulator will let you shift an entire combat step, which is just a rare thing to do in Commander, but it is so much fun. We don't have a specific section for sculpting cards because a lot of that heavy lifting gets done here in the Flash Creature section. For example, Alms Collector and Fairy Mastermind will both take advantage of other players trying to draw lots of cards. Archivist of Ogma will take advantage of players searching their libraries, while Errant and Giada will let you scope out the top of your library and hopefully cast you some extra flashers. Enduring Curiosity is, well, a curiosity for all your creatures. And Malcolm Alluring Scoundrel will let you loot for a bit, but then start getting you free spells in addition to a card draw. While we do have some interaction spells, we mostly have flash creatures with interaction built in, like Werefox Bodyguard and Solitude, who will function more like an Oblivion Ring or Swords to Plowshares, respectively. For some counterspells, we run Spell Queller and Subtlety, and for some versatility, we run Venser Shaper Savant and Tishana's Tidebender, which does have that same stifle type ability that we talked about before. Wonder if that means anything. Vizier of Deferment will give you a blink effect for either attackers or blockers, and you can use it either offensively to get a second enter the battlefield trigger, or defensively to save a creature. Blink effects like this in general, I really like having 1 or 2 in a deck just for kind of that surprise effect. Our last batch of flashers takes on a more protective role, with cards like Vexilus Praetor, which will protect Sonic some, and Gata and Luzu, which will protect creatures from your opponent's damage, and maybe, just maybe, even some damage you inflict on it. Sunpearl Kirin and Samwise the Stout-Hearted will both return something to your hand, either from play or after it's been killed. The Wandering Rescuer and Guardian of Faith will give some wider protection, with Guardian of Faith protecting against wipes, and the Rescuer giving you individual protection to your creatures in the form of hexproof. Ka-chow. Instead of waiting for your opponents to damage your creatures and make treasures, we're going to actively damage our creatures to make treasures. For example, stuff like Caltrops dealing damage to each creature whenever that creature attacks. So if you have Sonic out and all your hasty, flashy dudes attack, they all take 1 damage and thus create a bunch of treasures. Got it? Good. Now Magma Vein and Cart Clan Shaman will let you sacrifice things to ping, either lands or artifacts. Since you're making treasure, the requirement to sacrifice a land isn't like super rough, and you can sacrifice treasures to the Shaman to kind of double dip in making treasures. Note that you do need to stack the effects on the Shaman if you want to get multiple triggers, since the first trigger resolving will make the Shaman dead. Fire Magic and Tremor are 1-mana coin makers, with Fire Magic having the potential to scale up a bit and act as a kind of a small board wipe. Rain of Embers and Cinderclasm are 2-mana value coin makers, and I really wouldn't go much higher in mana cost for this type of effect. What I would do is run stuff like Subterranean Tremors and Spiteful Banditry, which are coin makers that scale up, either providing you with more treasures or destroying artifacts and giving you giant lizards. Ka-chow. While not the focus of the deck, the extra treasure generation will advance your normal strategies and be good for you overall, but I do like running a couple of cards to finish the game out, using those extra treasures and your aggressive nature. Rolling Earthquake and Earthquake can be used as a 2-mana value for 1 damage type spell, but you can also save up and deal damage to everything, well, players and creatures without flying. And since you should be ahead on life, you can kind of max these out and be the last player standing. Ka-chow. Sure, haste creatures go fast, but how do we go faster? Well, I'm not actually sure, but I do think that more attack steps is kind of like going more faster. To that end, we run Aurelia the War Leader, Full Throttle, and Great Terrain Heist, all of which will give you another attack step, or multiple attacks, or a superpowered new attack step. Alright, so I've been thinking, There are a lot of times where you eliminate a player and then lose because just by default you spent all your resources taking out one person, then the last person kind of wipes up the mess. I'm not crazy, that's a thing, right? And I think this might be the perfect deck to try out some risky business.
Ka-chow.
Let me introduce you to Alchemist Gambit, Chance for Glory, and Last Chance. I know these are not great extra turn cards, but they are one thing, and that is pretty inexpensive to cast, which means you can be proactive about your game plan and still grab the extra turn. And I think these type of effects can be very powerful when cast out of the blue. Now remember all those stifle effects from before? Well, if you didn't know, you can use the effect from something like Stifle to counter the at the end of that turn you lose effect from all three of these cards. Meaning not only can you surprise the board with an extra turn, but you can also have them under the illusion that you will lose on that extra turn, when in reality, you know you'll be alive and well. This deck falls into bracket 3 because of the Ancient Tomb and the extra turn cards, so you don't really ever chain them, you don't tutor for them, and you can't really go infinite with them. But they are there, and I guess that counts. This deck comes in at about $450, but a lot of that is actually in the lands, which is usually the case with these 3-color decks, so you shouldn't really be surprised by that. If you want a copy of the full deck list, I'll have a link in the description below, as I am fully in support of releasing lists, especially when I know whom or what is on them. If you enjoyed the video, feel free to leave a like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like it, and watch this video here, which YouTube will recommend, because YouTube knows you. Really knows you. On a deep, personal level.